And I'm honored to be able to introduce to him a living piece of history and a man who I'm sure will inspire all of us today. Thank you.
First of all, if you'll excuse me, I've never heard such a great group of orators in my life. I think your president should be fined. He serves the true definition of bullshitter.
Say so.
Say so. Travesty. Now, I would like to ask him one other question that I've always wondered. Does the Marine Corps ever give out a good conduct medal?
No, it's earned.
God, I know I didn't deserve one then. Gentlemen, it's an honor to be here tonight, a real pleasure. I've never been in a group of distinguished people as yourself. I just came back on a little trip with my wife. She had 2 operations, but we went down to Mississippi. But anyway, during the Civil War, there was a blacksmith, Bill, that just married the best looking woman in the county. And he was concerned about going away in the service, so he made a chastity belt for her with a big lock. The day they left, he got to thinking, if I leave and die and don't come back, I don't want to restrict her from a normal life. So he called his best friend over, Andy. He says, Andy, I want you to take this key, and if by chance I don't come back in 1 year, release my wife so she can have an ordinary life. He said, yes. The bugles blew, the flags waved, they got on the horses, and they were riding out of town. They were out of town 3 miles. Halt, 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 wait, wait, wait. And it's Bill, Bill, Bill. He says, what is it, Andy? He says, you gave me the wrong key. I was going to talk to you about Korea alone, but somebody asked me here tonight if I would mention about boot camp when I went through boot camp. We went through 14 weeks of boot camp. And when we went out there, they didn't have uniforms. We went through 2 weeks wearing civilian clothes. And you can imagine what a ratty-looking bunch we looked like. The other thing of it is, unfortunately, the night before we went out, a friend of mine's sister owned the old Navari downtown. And we stayed there till 3 in the morning. At 4:30, they came over and got me and told me we were flying out at 7. Now you can imagine spending 3 days getting harassed by the biggest son of a gun you've ever seen in your life. We made the bed, and I'd look at that thing and just wait to get in it, and man, you tear it up, and away we go. But it was 14 weeks, and it was one of the best learning experiences I've ever had in my life. We went, and then we went through rifle training. They took us down to Del Mar, and it's hard to believe, but they dumped us in the water to see if we could swim. And they had big poles to pull the guys out with because most of them couldn't swim. We practiced on a 3-story building, abandoned ship. I guess they thought we were going over on a ship or something, I don't know. But the one rule was, and they warned you, they counted 1, 2, 3, 4, and you jumped. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the fire team jumped. And you better get the hell out of the way when you got to the bottom. The other thing they warned you, make sure to protect yourself, you have a hand over your jewels and a hand over your nose. Because other than that, you'll be squeaking for a month or you might be dead. But anyway, I came through it fine. We went through combat training in Pendleton. And in Pendleton, we were divided up. And that's where our platoon was split up in. They sent me over to Del Mar. And they put me in a class, and there were 20 in the class, and 18 of them were college graduates, and that was to be a surveyor. I had never heard of a logarithm in my life. I thought we were gonna do some kind of dance or something, so anyway, I studied like the dickens. I came out second highest in class. I was the only one picked to go overseas.
Congratulations.
But at any rate, we went over on a, I called it the Santa Maria. I thought it was a reject from Columbus. It was a freighter that had been rebuilt. And we had 3,000 Marines on there, and it was as big as this building. We slept 10 high in the aisles of that, and we had all of our gear. We were 19 days going across. Guys were so sick. I was fortunate I never sick. We ate sitting up. We had to stand and eat standing up with trays. Believe me, you got very alert. You could see a tray come down and some guy would barf. You wanted to make sure you had your tray marked. We ate twice a day, 4 in the morning. We'd get through lines, and all the lines, if you had a book, the first guy in line would take and read the book, hand the page back. The time you got through the whole line, you read the whole book. But anyway, we had 2 meals, excellent meals. Hash, beans, and then in the afternoon we got in line again at 2, and that was it. And by the time we were supposed to be going there fast, but it took us 19 days to get across. We pulled into Yokohama, and we got out on the deck in Yokohama, and we did calisthenics. They take a platoon out at a time and do calisthenics to get guys back in shape. Then we boarded back on and went over to Incheon. And then I can start on with Incheon from there. They had a Jeep there, and I was assigned to headquarters, 4th Battalion, 11th Marines.
All right.
Going through Seoul, I'm the type of person that's very nervous and has to keep busy. There were a pair of barber clippers and scissors, and I said, you know what? I want to take them along because we didn't have a barber. And by the looks of you guys here, I think I could have trimmed up a little better than some of them. But at any rate, they took me through Seoul. We got on a train. It looked like a train from Disneyland. We went to Moonsani. At Moonsani, we got on a 4x and went up to the line MLR. And when I got up to headquarters, they had just got there, and we were building bunkers. And believe me, I got to be an expert with a tool. But anyway, I spent I don't know how long building bunkers. They came down and they told me I was going to an outpost on Bunker Hill. And they signed a guy to take me over to the trail. And he said, be sure to take the satchel. And I said, all right. I took it along with everything else. I got up there to relieve the guy. He said, you got your satchel? And I said, yeah, it's here. He said, make sure to check it out. Well, it's full of grenades. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. But anyway, after dark, you hear everything in the world. And you learn you never fired because then they could trace your rifle and know where you were. So you think it is, you'd hear things. I tossed enough grenades that night I could have pitched in the World Series. When dawn came up, I tell you what, I had the smoothest ground by front of me. There wasn't a bush or a tree left. And that's how I started out. They pulled me back. I don't remember how long I was there. Then I found out there were 5 guys from our platoon that went across that I was with. The one guy was Sykes. And it had to be Sykes because our initials went to payroll and all were the same. He was killed the 3rd day he was there. The Koreans, or the Chinese, were excellent with booby traps. They had what we called bouncing betties. And you'd trip it, they would come up, and they would actually just blow your head off. And that's how we lost Sykes right away. That was the first thing, and they never told what was happening. But anyway, the commander called me in. He says, what do you know about the guns. I said, I've never seen one. He said, we're sending you down to the battery so you can learn what they do. Well, gentlemen, you can imagine, here were these guys, and they were good. They got down to the battery, he said, you're going to gun number 1, and you're going to be with him for a while. I came down, this corporal looked at me and the whole crew, and believe me, there was no dress blues there. They were wearing everything you could imagine. They were waiting for some smart aleck from headquarters to come down and talk to them. I looked at that group and I thought, boy, I'm in trouble. So the corporal said to me, he says, what can you tell me about that gun there? I said, that howitzer. And I went over and I said, well, I can tell you this. You put a bullet in this end, you close that, and you pull the string and it goes out that end, and you hope to hell knows where it's going. After that, they accepted me. And anyway, those guys taught me more teamwork and more things than I've ever known in my life. I knew nothing about the guns, absolutely nothing. They taught me how to set them, what to do, and the teamwork they did in putting them together. My first assignment, though, was carrying the shell. Were they 98 pounds? There was another big guy there, and he and I would have a contest if we could carry 2 at a time. But they were throwing them that fast when we were bringing them. And how they took care of it is unbelievable to me. We had one day that we had heavy firing, and the guys were tired. I have to tell you this, when I mentioned outposts, everywhere we were, we had outposts. They were probably 100 to 200 yards away. We had a lot of infiltrators. And so anyway, I told them that night I would take the outposts because they were so tired and might chance me they'd have to fire again in the night. Well, I went up and in this bunker, and all of a sudden we had incoming. And of course it was short, 20 yards short, 50 yards short. And the officer of the day called up, he said, can you see the light? Can you see the fire? I said, I can hear them and I can see where they landed, but I can't see because they put just, what is it, the time of fire and the time you hear it. The other thing that I never understood, and you guys will have to tell me, every morning we would fire one firing to adjust the guns according to the atmosphere, and the wind, and anyway, they taught me all about that. We did it twice a day, once in the morning, once at night, so that off of our setting, they set all the other guns. And I'm telling you more right now than I ever know. But anyway, I got up on that outpost, and with that incoming coming in, you know, and after it ended, I took my flashlight to see what it was. I had a 7-foot big black snake crawling the hole with me. Wow. Now I've handled rattlers, and I thought, you know, I'm not going to shoot that thing because everybody in the world will be up here looking to see what's going on. So I took my bayonet and I stuck it back to the head and put it outside, and he was still flopping and turning. Well, the next morning, I took him down, put my on the rifle and took him down, and I coiled him up at the door of the tent where the guys would come out early to do the fire. They hollered for him to come out. Those guys saw that snake, and it was one hell of a wreck. Well, I'm going to tell you a little story now that, and I hope you ladies will accept this. There were 2 dogs in town at the main street that got hung up. And they were trying to pull them apart. They threw water on them, and it was a complete mess. Finally, the Reverend come over, he takes his coat off and puts them over the 2 dogs. And the crowd disperses, and he thought that's great. Little boy walked over and he says, Reverend, you want me to get those dogs apart for you? His son, he said, I really appreciate it. So he gives the Reverend the cloak back, licked his finger, he lifted the male dog's tail and whacked it. That male dog went over that hill and lay down. Reverend says, Sonny, how do you know how to do that? He says, no problem, Reverend. The old bastard belongs to me, he can dish it out, but he just can't take it. Well, in my estimation, gentlemen, there's a theory to that. I was a hell of a jokester and did a lot of things over there. I had a lot of fun. But I knew that any time I handled it out, I had to get it back. When they called me back to go back up on the OP, and I had to leave the gun. Believe me, those guys did more things to me than you can imagine, and I laughed and enjoyed every one of them. It was one of the greatest experiences I ever had. What a great group of teamwork. When I went back up, they sent me over on the other side, and I kept thinking, they wanted to get rid of me. They didn't want me to stick around. But I sent me over with two guys in the 7th Marines, and I think it was the idea to get a different view of the whole terrain. While we were over there, we got the weather turned bad. It was cold. I mean, 30 below, and you're sitting between two bodies of water. We had the Imjin Gang River right in front of us, and you were freezing. Well, it's hard to imagine a group of Marines doing it, but we heard there was an Army tent. It was back about 5 miles. It was a command tent, and if you know what they look like, they're in an L, so it prevents the light from coming out. Well, we had a parapet there that had been blown out with shell. We put that tent in there, and we thought, gosh, we're going to have one more night. And we decided we'd change our shift. We'd go on 2 and off 4, so the guys wouldn't get so cold. There was 3 of us. Well, we were really tickled. We thought we were going to have a warm night. That night, the night shelling, the first shell was a Willie Peter, white phosphorus. It hit that tent, and we lost everything we had. And there was a Canadian outfit next to us, and they brought us over some clothes and that. But then we went back, and it was, they came back for Christmas. Well, all the time, every time I would come back to headquarters, the guys would wait for me to get there to cut hair. I got, fairly, you could imagine some of the cuts they got. I mean, it was unbelievable. But the officers that were going on R&R, going somewhere, finally got enough confidence, and they asked me to come cut their hair. Well, I would go over and cut their hair, but the main thing I did was listen. And always they were talking about their whiskey ration coming in. For some reason, it always got hijacked before it ever got But anyway, after Christmas, right after 3 days after Christmas, guys, we had a good time. I led them to Christmas songs. We had a great time. 3 days later, they called me in, and they were sending me to I-Corps. Now, I-Corps was the general command post of all Korea on the line. I didn't know that, and above all, they never told me why I was going. And anyway, they put me in a 4x4, and I drive for, I suppose, 10 hours to get over to I-Corps. I got in there, and they had a big room, and they had all these maps and that, and had control of the whole perimeter, I guess, the MLR. And I didn't know why I was there, for the life of me. They never invited me in. I just go in there and observe. But the thing I did, I was in a nice tent, and they had nice supply waiting in the back. And anyway, I was there for, I suppose, a week or so, and I learned an awful lot, because just listening to them and directing things, the Marines would, incidentally, for your information, the Marines were stationed in absolutely the most vital part on the MLR. It included 4 outposts, Carson, Vegas, Reno, and Berlin. And that was the lightest area they had, that if anyone was to break through, they would break back down through the south. And anyway, the Marines would report in, they would report in activity every day all across, which was interesting for me. But then they told me I was going home. They sent that 4x for me, up to get me. And for some reason, we parked by their supply tent. We got socks, we got gloves, we got hats, we got blankets. That truck went back loaded. And I did learn one thing. The Army was better supplied than we were. But anyway, when I got back then, they had decided that, and things that Panama John had become more uneasy, that we were to be secondary emplacements back. And so I was to go back, and they picked up people from all the units, and we put in stakes and marked them. And I assumed then that the engineers were coming in to build the parapets. I didn't know. We were back there for a couple of days. That was my first great experience with the Koreans, because I'd never been around them. And there was a funeral, and the funeral was unbelievable. It was beautiful. They had flags, they played cymbals, they had played drums, and I just said, it was unbelievable. And I'd seen these mounds all over Korea, and I didn't know what they were. In Korea, they bury their people sitting up, overlooking their favorite sign. And it was really interesting. Well, we met down at the bottom because they always bring mess into us in the canisters, but being a, excuse my expression, a smart ass, I took one of the lids and I posted an epitaph and staked it up near the mountain. The epitaph read, "Here lies the bones of Martha Jones, for her hell holds no terror. Born a virgin, died a virgin, no hits, no runs, no errors." Well, the crew, they got the attitude back up, and we had a lot of laughs in that, and it was great. Till they called me back up, and we got back up to headquarters. I was called in, and the interpreter was there, and the major says they're upset because they think you were disgracing their country. And I apologized to him and told him under no circumstances would I ever degrade their country. They were great people. And he accepted my apologies, and I said, "Well, thank you, sir." And I went to leave, and the major said, "Sir, you haven't accepted my apology yet." I said, "No, sir." He said, "You're going with this young man, and for your expertise in poems, you're going up on this hill and you're going to dig a hole 3 foot wide and 6 foot deep. And it has to be done in 5 days, or my apology will never get to you and you'll never receive anything." And I went up, he took me up and told me where they wanted that hole done. And I, God, I should have embraced and loved that trenching tool because I use it enough. But anyway, I said, I'm not going to do it in the daylight because we were exposed. And so I said, I'm going to go home, and tonight I'll go up and start. I went up that night to start, and the hole was dug. My outfit had dug it for me before I got up there. This is the kind of men you serve with, and I was so proud. Then, right after that, and this is where your gentleman was probably captured, was on Vegas. Without our knowledge, the Chinese had a whole army settled in the back of Vegas. They had made a tunnel that was big enough to bring them through. That morning, I fired for firing, and I saw some movement, and the shell hit on top of our own place, our own bunkers. And I says, check your readings, because we were wrong. And I says, that one's short. I says, see if what's wrong. The next one lit on us up. Then all hell broke loose. The Chinese hit that area so fast and so hard. Those Marines on that line, they took one hell of a whipping. We were firing 24 hours a day. We burnt the guns, pulled the barrels off the guns. These guys worked like the dickens. And finally, they hit all the areas. They told me to come down. I reported back to headquarters. And they were asking for volunteers to go support the infantry because they had lost that many men. I forgot to tell you that, and I don't understand, you guys know, there were different nose cones. I remember going through there. We had nose cones for shrapnel. We had delay nose cones. The commander somewhere called the fact there were so many in the trenches, we sent delay shells. And the idea was we buried them in the trenches. And unfortunately, there were some of our own buried there. But and it went on that way, I can't remember how many days. But when I came down, they were looking for volunteers to go back to infantry. And I volunteered to go back. I said, go back, those guys are catching hell. And they wouldn't let me go. He said, we're so short-handed here, you're staying here. So anyway, it lit up. I went back up, they came up and told me I'd been promoted to sergeant. I don't even remember who told me, I think it was a mess guy or something, I don't remember what. But at any rate, they told me I was going to go on ARC to Japan. I got 4 days. Well, we were paid $72 a month, that was our pay. And we were paid in script, and script had a very colored stuff. And we had to replace it twice because somebody had learned how to counterfeit it. But at any rate, when we went down, they took us in trucks and we picked up, I remember there might 14 or 56 of us went in the truck down to Kimpo Airport. And we traded our script in for American dollars. And then that was my second flight on an airplane in a canvas bucket. We flew from Kimpo to Sullivan Air Base, and I don't know if Sullivan Air Base is still in Korea, I mean in Japan. We pulled our sea bags out and got our greens. We had 2 days in, and at Sullivan they traded our money dollars for yen. Well, I took the train and went down to Kyoto. If you ever have the opportunity to go to Kyoto, go there. It is actually the most beautiful place in the world. It's the only city we didn't bomb in the Second World War. It's a religious capital of Japan. The trees and the bushes and the flowers are absolutely beautiful. After leaving an area that was so drab, and I hate to tell you, it stunk so bad. Because the kimchi and their way of handling their own products in the fields and that, it was bare. But Korea, going to Kyoto was unbelievable. I went into a shop, I had all my yen. I bought my mother and my 2 sisters complete sets of orange hockey china. And they shipped them back. Then I bought my brother some bamboo adjustable poles, and my dad a Gabardine coat. And then what little money I had, but over there you didn't need much. And the guys over there really didn't give a damn what they were doing anyway because they knew they were going back. And I'm not going to tell you all the stories that went on. I can remember though we didn't have enough money, we would wait in the big hotels. They had big wide doors. And we would wait till we see somebody leave a room. We'd go in and make the bed after take a shower and sleep until they run us out. I passed over one thing. In boot camp, it got so cold there that I unfortunately got pneumonia. It got so cold. And they sent me over to the corpsman. They handed me 2 APC pills and said, go lay down for 6 hours and you're ready to go back. I'll tell you what, if we had had good looking corpsmen like you, I'd have been sick every day. I wasn't going to tell you this story, but I think you might enjoy it. I was with a big Greek. Boy, he was a big ornery son of a gun. It was hard for me to keep all these guys out of trouble. But anyway, we got in the room to sleep. Boy, we were tired. We knew we had to be back at Sullivan that afternoon. And he laid down on the bed and with nothing on. He had a sheet laid over him. The doors are like the hospital doors here. You could push the bed out in the hall. I took his bed with him sleeping, pushed it on the elevator, pushed him in the lobby, and as the bed went out, I held the sheet. You can imagine. I went and got a train and got back to Sullivan as fast as I could. He got back there and he says, "You son of a gun." He says, "I must have laid out in the lobby for 4 hours." You know, I guess I always try to have a lot of laughs and make the best of things. It's too damn tough anyway, and so you do the best you can do. When I got back, I went back up, and things had kind of calmed down. We still had our everyday harassment fire. We had it constant, but it wasn't as bad as usual. They told me that my time was up, and I was going to send me home. And so I went down and reported in the headquarters. The major says, "I'm looking at your jacket. You never did mess duty." I said, "No, sir, I never did." He says, "Why not in boot camp?" And I said, "They give us 2 weeks to bayonet practice and combat." And I said, "I didn't even think anything about it." He says, "In the Marine Corps, everybody was mess duty. You report down to the mess tent." Here I was going home a week after that. I was the best cook they ever had. I could make the fluffiest potatoes out of dehydrated potatoes you've ever seen. The milk, we got dehydrated milk. Boy, I could stir it so foamy. The guys had come through and they said, "Gosh, that milk is so good." And I said, "I have a cow back over here." And I had so much fun with the cooks, I'm not kidding you. But they were great. They were really great. And anyway, we had hash one day and doctored up real good, put a lot of hot sauce and that on. The guy said, "Gosh, that's the best hash you've ever had in here." And I said, I know. "Well, what is it?" And I said, "We got the dog." But I was down there every morning at 4:30 heating up the pans and doing everything. And in the afternoon, I'd sunbathe out on the side, cleaning them up. But I was glad to come home. And so I went back to Ascom City, and that's where they process you out. They took away our clothes, and we had to go get dusted. I don't know what we were really dusted for, and then we had to go through physical. They told you to lay all your things on the bed, except your billfold and your money. When you came back, the Koreans had stole everything you had, which you didn't care because you knew where you were going. We boarded that ship coming home. It was 14 days. And I went down and volunteered for mess duty because I'll tell you, that quietness and that loneliness, you know, it worked on you. And so anyway, it was great. It was so pretty at night and so calm. All through my time there, I had kept a journal. And I had a bag of pictures. I got up and I gave that journal and that bag of pictures to the sharks. I said, "I don't want to see it." And anyway, the greatest moment in my life, without a doubt, you'll have to excuse me, they slowed that ship up. We come under that Golden Gate, and to see America and know what it stands for. The Marine Band, excuse me, was down there playing the national anthem And the Marine Corps hymn, I'll tell you what, I cried. It meant so much to me to get home. And people don't understand what this country is. I officiated ball for 40 years, football, basketball, and every time they would play that national anthem, I still remember coming through there. It's the greatest moment you ever have, believe me. They processed us out. They asked me how I wanted to go home, and I said I want to take the Vista-Tone train home from Oakland to Sacramento to Salt Lake City to Denver. And they took me over and when I got on the train, a very unfortunate situation happened. There were 20 young secretaries on that Vista. They had been sent out by Rockefeller to see the country so they knew who they were dealing with and what's going on. We stopped at Sacramento for 20 minutes. Those young girls had gathered up enough booze that I couldn't believe it. They had gone off. We got ready to leave, and this large gentleman gets on. I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to Denver." I said, "Oh," I said, "We'll be together." And he said, "I know we'll be together." He's a railroad detective. They decided to stay with me. We pulled, I'll tell you, the greatest experience you have was pulling in on that Vista going to Colorado and see these Rocky Mountains. And it was absolutely beautiful. When we stopped at Grand Central Station, my family were down there. I had a hard time getting off. I got off, my mother was crying. They were unloading 3 caskets with flags on out of the car. And she was really hurt. It hurt her. Fortunately, my family has never heard me say one thing about my time in Korea. You've heard more tonight than my family has ever heard. But I stayed home. My orders, I didn't pay attention to my orders, hell, I didn't care. I was glad to get home. I forgot to mention to you, at one time in Korea, we were getting all kinds of documents shot over into our area, telling us about what's your wife doing tonight, and why are you here when the capitalists are home getting rich, and why are you doing this? And so we had to go back and take, I don't remember, a 2 or 3 day class, because we had, at that time, it's the only time in the history of the United States we had 4 defectors out of the Army that had joined the North Korean Army. Incidentally, those 4 came back and were sentenced here. But anyway, we went through that. And basically, at the time, it didn't bother me. I wasn't married, and I wasn't too concerned about capitalists running off the country. But I went into the pool hall to have a hamburger. And a friend of mine, a couple of years ahead of me, had started truck line and had become very wealthy. And yet he was also an alcoholic. He walked in that pool hall, and he said, and that's when they had just settled the Panmunjom Treaty. It was late in July. He said, "God, I hope that war would go on forever. I never got so damn rich in my life." There were 2 hits. The second one was when he hit the floor. I was asked to leave, and I left. I got home, I looked at my orders, and I was already a week late reporting back to Pendleton. And so, I'll finish up. I went back to Pendleton, and that's the first time I was in the main gate. And they told me I had to report to Camp 2 out at San Onofre. Well, that's 52 miles away from the main gate. So anyway, I drove down there. I met the guy, and I said, "I'm supposed to report to," he said, "Yeah, there's where you go." I went up and went to report in the Quonset hut. The colonel met me. He was short, stocky. He had a swagger stick laying on the desk with a bullet on the end of it. His fingertips had all been damaged. He was in the Bataan Death March. he was the toughest son of a gun in the world. And he says, he just gave me help because I wasn't there on time, but he'd pick my orders up. Sent me down to my company commander was Lieutenant Doudna. And those, I remember 3 names is all, that's all I remember. Doudna, and then there was a Lieutenant Fry, who lived next door to the Roosevelts in New York. When I went down to see Doudna, I had met him when I was over with the 7th, but he had got hit underneath the chin with shrapnel, and it blew out part of his face. I didn't know that, but anyway, they did a beautiful job with plastic surgery, but he was an honored son of a gun. And he told me, he says, now, I told you, I want to make sure I had your records, because at times you're going to false muster me. Now, I don't know what he had going on out in California, but we made an agreement to do that. And so anyway, I stayed there, and I took groups of companies through combat training. And we would go out, we had night fighters, that we would go in. I'd get them up at 3 in the morning, we'd go places, and the colonel told me, he says, you just beat the hell out of them because they don't know where they're going. Well, unfortunately, he called up, and he says, we're getting a company of 90-day wonders from out east. I said, so? And he says, they're no different than anybody else. Give them hell. Well, gentlemen, and I was run up an average about 6 times a day, because I wasn't treated as gentlemen. Anyway, I'd go into that colonel, and he'd grab that swagger stick, he'd start banging that damn thing and hollering at me, open the drawer, pull out a jug, pour each a glass of whiskey, keep it up. And that's just what I did. I ended up getting out of the Corps, then in Pelham. The gentleman in the time, I still am probably the most dedicated Marine there is. You get it in you. It's so proud to be with you group of people. I've never seen so much grass in my life. And even though, like your commander said, you're a group of bullshitters, I couldn't belong to your club because I'd be broke. And not only that, I'd drink all your rum. But I still try to go visit the nursing homes. I was commander of our Legion for 14 years. And I want to tell you something about Korea. In a dinner of 600 people. The chaplain gets up and makes a prayer, and part of the dinner was for dedication of the service dinner. And his prayer started with World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and went on. Completed the lot. I worked for 14 years to build a big memorial in our town for veterans. We had a colonel who was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam come do the dedication. His speech was dedicated to all the servicemen from World War I and women from World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and on. I asked him later, I said, did you happen to forget something? So if you every once in a while, gentlemen, it does kind of dig into you, but to me, Korea was probably the most important war we ever faced, in my opinion. The communists were moving, their idea was to go all the way through the South Pacific. China at that time was threatening Formosa. We had unusual communist programs going on in Japan. But what was completed there was done. Now I'm going to quit because I know I've taken up too much of your time. But in visiting the nursing home, I was there excuse me, a gentleman who was writing an article for the paper. He goes over to the first chair. He says, sir, he said, what do you contribute your old age to? He says, I drank a glass of whiskey every night before I went to bed. He says, that's wonderful. He says, how old are you? He says, I'm 90. Went over to the next guy sitting there. He says, "Sir, you really look good." He says, "What do you contribute your old age to?" He says, "I live by the Bible. I studied the Bible every day, and I live very close to the Bible." He says, "And how old are you?" He says, "I'm 82. There was a little old Marine over there in a rocking chair with a cap on rocking. He walked over and he says, "Sir," and he says, "What do you contribute your old age to?" He says, "I slept with a different woman every night of my life." He says, "What?" He said, "Yes, I slept with a different woman every night of my life." He said, "My, how old are you?" He says, 23. Before I leave, I would request that your gentleman back there read an article for you.
1st Marine Division, Presidential Unit Citation. The Secretary of the Navy takes pleasure in commending the 1st Marine Division reinforced. Her service is set forth in the following citation. For exceptionally meritorious service during operations against enemy aggressors, forces in Korea from 11 August 1952 to 5 May 1953, and from 7 to 27 July 1953. During these periods, the 1st Marine Division reinforced, maintained the integrity of over 35 miles of defense line in the Panmunjom truce area against the constant aggressions of the enemy. During the time the division was in the lines, it was under fire and attack by a resolute, well-equipped, and fanatical hostile force. The division maintained an aggressive defense and constantly kept the enemy off balance by continuously patrolling, probing, and raiding enemy positions, accompanied by the full weight of artillery and air support. Commencing the August 1952 and frequently thereafter during the months of October 1952. March 1953 and July of 1953, the enemy launched a series of large-scale attacks to capture certain terrain features critical to the defense of friendly lines. The outposts and main defense position, called Bunkler Hill, the Hook Reno, Carson, Vegas, Berlin, and East Berlin, along with certain smaller outposts, gave title to battles of unsurpassed ferocity in which the full effort of the Marine Division was required to hurl back the attackers at heavy cost to both the division and the enemy. That the lines in the division sector remained firm and unbreached at the cessation of hostilities on 27 July 1953 gave eloquent tribute to the resourcefulness, courage, professional acumen, and stamina of the members of the 1st Marine Division reinforced. Their inspiring and unyielding devotion to the fulfillment of their vital mission reflects the highest credit upon themselves and the United States Naval Service. Secretary of the Navy, Charles S. Thomas.
Semper Fi.
Gentlemen, I'm absolutely the most fortunate man in the world. I didn't get married when I was 37, and I married probably the most beautiful woman in the world. She's so considerate and so nice. I mean, I couldn't expect any more. I am blessed having two of the greatest boys. One is my son here, James T., who's an F-16 fighter pilot that's stationed out at Buckley. He's been over 4 times. My other son is a professional musician. They were both great athletes. We won all state in all sports. My younger son, unbelievable, a musician, was the first one in our school to lead on all 4 sports and still holds the state triple jump record. So, I am blessed, and there's one thing that I have to remind you of. And our old saying is, every day is a bonus day, and live it to the best, because you never know what's happening the next. Thank you very much for having me come to your shop.
Well, on behalf of us orators,
Now, that's not what you call me.
Well, on behalf of the orators, the bullshitters, the hot air flowers, and the flagellants, I want to speak some truth to you right now and say we are truly honored and thankful to have you share your experience and for your service to our country and our Corps. Starting with your enlistment through today, you serve as an honor and inspiration to all those Marines, past, present, and future. On behalf of your efforts and of your presence today, I want to present to you this plaque in remembrance of you joining us tonight. I want to read it real quick. It says, Rocky Mountain Marine Mess Night, Guest of Honor, Staff Sergeant James Reeman, USMC, 22 January 2015. Your call to duty never went unanswered. Semper Fidelis. So from the Marines of the Rocky Mountain Marines, Quebec Battery 514, CLB 453, and the other Marines in the room, thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope I didn't take up too much of your drinking time. And if any of you run for office, you're great orators, I'll vote for you.